Batman Arkham City is a fantastic game. It's a massive improvement on the game that came before it, Arkham Asylum. It upgrades the game in just about every way: story, combat, world, characters, side quests. If you liked Arkham Asylum, then Arkham City is more of that, but better. We're playing an improved version of Batman here, and because of that, we have to deal with upgraded issues. The threat is now widespread, located across a city area instead of a smaller island. There are more places to explore, more nooks and crannies to use, more gadgets, more options when fighting. The story ups the stakes as well. Things become a little more permanent here, and the relationships between the characters that we talked about before are explored even deeper. Arkham City just works so well. It's an absolute classic. And while Arkham Asylum was great, Arkham City just takes everything up to the next level. Combat is now incredibly smooth. It's challenging to hold a combo, but fair. We constantly feel like if we made a mistake, then it's our fault. It almost feels like a rhythm game, but we aren't playing to the beat of the music, we're playing to the beat of the battle. We have to find ourselves in tune with the fight to get the maximum flow that we can. The collectibles are jacked up 10 notches here. There's so many things to find, so many trophies and side quests. While I do think there are probably more than necessary, a lot of the side content that's been added is varied and interesting. Some of the little stories that are told feel like their own self-contained issues of the comics, little one-off adventures that Batman has that only the dedicated reader would consume. The story itself is also great. The ideas that Arkham Asylum toyed with, the ones about Batman, Joker, the entire cast of villains trying to thwart Batman, are all explored in further depth here. The world is also just amazing. The widened landscape looks and feels a lot better. Traversing around this city feels much better. We're given tons more upgrades. We're introduced to many more characters, and this whole place feels a lot more grand. There are more stories to be told here, and Arkham City decides to tell as many as it can. I remember being very excited for Arkham City when it first came out, and just absolutely devouring it upon release. The game was given huge praise, and most still hold to that today, but I was interested to see if that praise would hold for me years later. So that's what I want to do today. I want to take a deep dive into Arkham City. We'll be looking at gameplay, mechanics, story, and everything in between. If you haven't seen my previous video on Arkham Asylum, I would recommend checking it out now, as this sequel will inevitably spoil some things from the previous entry. If you enjoy the video and want to support the channel, you can do so for free by liking the video and subscribing to the channel. It really helps me out and ensures that I can keep making videos like this. You can also support me on Patreon, where I upload longer versions of my full series retrospectives, rambling text post updates, and early access to my videos. You can also follow me on Twitch, where I play games that I'm not currently reviewing. Spoilers for Batman Arkham City. Hey Dad, it's me, your favorite son. And today, I'd like to talk about Batman Arkham City. Before development on Arkham Asylum had finished, the team had already thought about ideas for a sequel. This was clear in Arkham Asylum, with the hints and secrets pointing toward Quincy Sharp creating an Arkham City. They wanted to do this so that if a sequel did get made, the two games felt connected in a realistic way, rather than just a tacked-on second entry. The main idea for the game was to move outside of the walls of Arkham Asylum and into the wider world of Gotham. The team wanted Gotham to be a realistic setting that felt like the world that fans had seen in the comics, rather than a bland city with empty streets. The team decided against providing Batman with a usable Batmobile in Arkham City. This was because it would make the game work completely different. They thought that the gliding and grapple gun would be enough traversal for players. It also didn't make sense because the city was mostly destroyed, and the Batmobile wouldn't be able to get over the wrecked terrain. The director for Arkham City stated that the game's key goal was to deliver a Batman in Gotham feeling. This was core to the atmosphere and the environment of the game. It was also core to the story. Kevin Conroy, who returned to voice Batman, also commented that the game's story was much darker, relating it to Batman Beyond: Return of the Joker. The team had many ideas for new gadgets in this entry, but decided to only include the ones that made sense and felt authentic to Batman. They also made the decision to let the character keep the gadgets obtained in the first game, so that it felt like Batman was prepared for the situation to come. Arkham City was developed to be 5 times larger than the Asylum. Rocksteady wanted to broaden the scope of the game. They wanted players to be able to feel like they were gliding through a massive space and swinging up to buildings. This in turn caused the team to introduce tons of new challenges and secrets in the world for players to find. It was important as well that the city feel segmented into different territories, controlled by different villains. The city was designed so that players could notice who controlled the area they were in when they entered it. The city and environment were such a large task that Rocksteady had to expand from 75 people to over 100, and Arkham City also required a massive crunch period to get it finished. Batman Arkham City was released on October 18th, 2011 for PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. A few notes before we get into the game. Arkham City was re-released as a part of a remaster of the first 2 games in the series called Return to Arkham. This was mostly a visual upgrade and was the same version that I played in the Arkham Asylum video. This was the most accessible version of Arkham City and just generally looks good and runs great. It also included all of the DLC and pre-order bonuses that were released for the game, which was a lot. Arkham City begins with a bit of scene setting. The game takes place months after Arkham Asylum. Quincy Sharp is now mayor of Gotham City after declaring the Joker situation at the Asylum his success rather than Batman's. It's clear at this point that his whole Spirit of Arkham ordeal from the previous game was a full-fledged corruption. He's now just as much of a villain as the rest of them. Sharp has converted some of Gotham City's slums into Arkham City, his new, massive city-sized penitentiary. We actually begin the game not as Batman, but as Catwoman. This was part of a DLC that was released. It was released after the main game, but interweaves itself into the story of Arkham City. We will play as Catwoman a few times throughout the course of the tale. This first mission is pretty short. Catwoman is trying to steal some goods from Two-Face's vault and has to defeat his goons. After she gets her shot at the money, she is kidnapped. We then begin the game and see the true state of Gotham. It's become a police state. Citizens are whisked away to the city-wide mega prison even for the most simple of crimes. Bruce Wayne is now speaking in public against Sharp's decisions. This urban sprawl that's now become chaos is clearly not what Bruce wants for his city. But soon, Tiger Security swoops in and takes Bruce away. Tiger is working for Hugo Strange. Strange is an incredibly OG villain in Batman's history. He originally was depicted as a mad scientist, but eventually became a character obsessed with Batman's true identity. He constantly wants to know who is really behind the mask. Now he holds the reins over Tiger, who is a powerful force in the city, originally contracted by Sharp for the policing of this new city. Strange has now captured Bruce and is going to reveal his identity. He's also going to take control over Arkham City. As Bruce, we're now out of control. We're locked in a chair without the suit, without the gadgets. We have nothing. We're not playing Batman here. We're playing Bruce Wayne. Bruce breaks out of his binds, but very quickly he's attacked and led into another area. We're left with the rest of the inmates and are eventually attacked by them. The Penguin decides to use this situation to his advantage to take out Bruce Wayne, a great threat to him. We take these goons out and take out the Penguin with one punch. I like this little touch for the character, as Penguin really isn't strong on his own. It's his connections and his influence that make him powerful. His physical prowess is actually quite lackluster. We have to climb to higher ground and contact Alfred so that Bruce can get his suit. It's at this point that Bruce has become Batman. We're no longer playing the millionaire playboy from Gotham City, we're playing the Dark Knight. I really like this intro. It's quite an advanced version of what we saw in Arkham Asylum. We're introduced to the situation at hand, the antagonists that we're up against, but it also develops the character that we're playing. Bruce is automatically lesser when he isn't in the suit, not just because he doesn't have his gadgets, but because he doesn't have his symbol. He isn't the Dark Knight. He isn't the Bat. He isn't the Shadow of Gotham City. This is a concept that's often touched upon in adaptations of Batman, the comics, and especially in the Christopher Nolan films. But Batman isn't just a man with gadgets and a cape. He's more than that. He's a symbol for justice, for something better. He's an inspiration in the city. He inspires others. But Bruce isn't close to that. He can do certain things, and he can have an impact in the city, but he can't do what Batman can do. So when we put on the suit, it's time to do what Batman can do. Our first mission is to save Catwoman from Two-Face. We head to the courthouse and find her being held in a trial led by the villain himself. We have to defeat Two-Face's goons. This seems as good a time as ever to talk about combat in Arkham City. The combat in Arkham City works very similar to Arkham Asylum, at least in core structure. The free flow combat is back. We can flow between enemies, attacking and countering assaults when indicated. This is the bread and butter of our combat. Keeping this up without getting hit or missing for a while will keep our combat multiplier growing. When we get up to a certain combo, we can use in-combat gadgets. An especially useful one is an auto takedown, which knocks out an enemy in the middle of combat. This is relatively the same as Arkham Asylum, though. It's the new additions that are particularly interesting. We have a ton more things to do in combat. We can get a powered-up mode if we get our combo particularly high. We can cast a storm around us, or even mass take down enemies on the ground. There's a ton of depth here, and Arkham City really expands upon the system from the previous entry. It really gives this system a whole new level that can be experienced. The genius of this system is that it can be experienced on a surface level very easily. We can spend the entire game just using attacks and counters, and the whole thing will work really well. But if we want more depth from the system, we can go much further. When we start to incorporate other elements, we start to think about every move we make. Every button press has to be purposeful. The game even introduces critical strikes, which force us to focus on our timing for each attack to be able to eliminate enemies quicker. Timing, placing the correct attacks on the correct enemies, placing attacks at the correct time, everything has to be perfect if we want to get a great combo. The other element that I think has been massively upgraded is that Arkham City's combat just feels much more smooth. In Arkham Asylum, it feels like we're slicing through water with the current, but Arkham City feels like we're just slicing through air. The system just flows so incredibly well, and if we make a mistake, it feels like our problem, not the system's. Like I said before, there's a rhythm to the combat, and getting good at fighting a pack of goons is just a matter of finding that tune. There's a song being sung somewhere in the wilderness, and we just have to listen for it. The Predator sections also return in this entry. Of course, if it's a Batman game, we have to have some form of stealth. It's ingrained in Batman's character that he has to skulk in the shadows. He has to sneak up on enemies and take them out from where they can't see him. Now, I did remark that I'm not a huge fan of stealth, and the Arkham Asylum stealth sections did seem to slow the game down for me, but I think they're mostly fixed and greatly improved in Arkham City. The system itself, again, at its core, works much the same to Arkham Asylum. We can stealth around and take down enemies by sneaking up on them, take them out from vantage points, glide kick and take them down. There's a myriad of ways for us to eliminate thugs. There's also a lot more that we can do with this system as well. Just in general, much more mechanics are introduced than in the previous game. This isn't really the biggest improvement though. I think the biggest improvement to the game is that it just feels quicker. One of my biggest complaints with the previous entry is that the stealth sections just seem to slow down the whole experience. It provides a wild contrast to the combat sections where we're quickly rushing around an arena punishing enemies, but now I think that the system has been quickened a bit. Including stealth sections is always going to slow down a game because stealth is at its core about patience, but I think that there's a fine balance here. We need to have enough patience to make the system engaging, but the system can't be so slow that it makes the game feel like it's dragging. The enemies just feel like they move much more. There's more activity and more opportunity to attack, which means less waiting around. There's also a certain flow to this system. Just like combat, we have to tune ourselves in with the flow of enemies. We have to see where we are and touch the pulse of the room. The level up system has been expanded as well to include a lot more upgrades. We level up when we get enough experience. The experience comes from completing missions, fighting enemies, and tackling side objectives. We can now upgrade much more, and there's a lot more variety here in the way we can decide to go. Obviously, we aren't going to miss out on anything, but we can focus upgrades first where we think we might be weak. For example, I picked the upgrades that focused on stealth because I knew that I was weaker in that area and that I liked stealth less, so I wanted it to be easier. The whole of the combat system has been greatly upgraded and works fantastic. It took everything that Arkham Asylum did and just pushed it up a notch. The whole system just makes us feel like Batman. In both ways. Even if I like the stealth system less because of my bias, it still feels like we are Batman. We feel like we're lurking in the shadows, that we have way more information than the enemies that we're fighting. We have the upper hand because of our tech, because of our planning and our intellect. The free-flow combat system really makes us feel like a superhero, but it doesn't make us feel like a god, not like Superman, the Flash, or Chad, Green Lantern. We feel like a man who's fighting with the equipment that he has and the information that he has. He's battling enemies in the best way that he knows how, the only way that he can. It's a great system in general, and jumping across the battlefield, bouncing from enemy to enemy, always just feels fun. Once we defeat Two-Face's goons, Catwoman traps the villain for us. She almost gets shot. We can then use our detective mode to track the crime scene. Here we find the ballistics on the shot that came through the window. We can trace this shot back, jumping across the city to find the source. We track it back to the medical center where we find Harley Quinn. She tells us that Joker wants to see Batman, but the Joker isn't up to finding him right now. We take out the goons in the church and solve a riddle from the Riddler before heading upstairs and finding the source of the shot. It came from a sniper that was rigged up to fire. The Joker has also rigged up the top of the cathedral to explode. Luckily, after we escape, we tap into the radio signal that Joker was communicating from. We can follow the signal to the steel mill. We dive into the chimney on the mill and head inside, avoiding the treacherous fires below. One thing that's also been greatly improved in Arkham City is the traversal. We travel across the city mostly the same, by grappling and gliding, but it's the environmental design and the grappling upgrade that makes it work so well. First of all, the city provides us many more buildings that we can grapple from to make traveling a lot easier. The amount of grapple points has been increased tenfold. There are so many more places to travel on, to walk on, to climb from. The environment in general just has a lot more to offer. There's so much more to see here. Riddles to solve, trophies to find, and Easter eggs to look for. But with all that additional surface, it makes it way easier to travel from point A to point B. This again puts us in the shoes of the characters a lot more. As Batman, we shouldn't be just gliding onto the ground and then walking around the world. We should be jumping across rooftops, not seen by the men on the street unless we deign to drop on top of them and attack. The other reason that traversal works so well is that we get a key upgrade that aids in traversal. After we complete the first set of AR challenges, short missions that see us flying through green highlighted rings, we get the grapnel upgrade. This allows us to boost off of a grapple, which launches us into the air straight into a glide. This allows us to effectively never touch the ground. It makes traversal so much more smooth. We can also dive bomb and lift up to launch ourselves further. This again makes us effectively fly. We can just keep diving and launching up. As long as we have the room, we can carry this as far as we want. Traversal in general has just been upgraded in service of making us actually feel like Batman. There are many ways that we can travel across the city, but whatever way we choose, we're doing it quickly and we're staying above the enemies or in the shadows. Heading through the steel mill, we eventually see that Harley has captured a Gotham worker and decides to torture them a bit more. We have to take down a huge group of Joker's goons. One of them is larger with only one arm. These brutes have to be taken out by using the beatdown mechanic. We can use our cape to stun the enemy and then deliver a quick succession of blows to them. This can be a great way of racking up an incredible combo very fast. Harley escapes to a room above us with Joker inside. We can't get in yet, though. We have to take out some goons further inside and rescue a medical worker. Here we get access to the remote medical charge. This is a very useful gadget. We can stun enemies in combat. We can also take them down in stealth by activating a nearby power generator. We can also use this for exploration. By activating generators for different doors, we can get past them. We talked about it when referencing development, but one of my favorite parts of this sequel is that we keep all of our gadgets from the previous game. Most sequels generally take the upgrades from the character away. There's a trend of sequels having some sort of story beat in the beginning of the game that rips the character's upgrades and powers away. We then have to climb our way back to the top, gaining the same upgrades and new ones across the course of the entry. Arkham City doesn't do this. We played the first game, we know what we had, and we're only going to get more upgrades as we move forward. This creates a permanence to the character. It feels like we're playing the same Batman from the previous game, not a different iteration. It also makes us feel like the things we did in the previous game weren't wasted. The nice thing about the gadgets in Arkham City is that they all serve a dual purpose. The first is usually in combat. We can use these to stun or take down enemies. The second is that they serve a purpose in the environment as well. There's usually multiple uses for these gadgets, and that just makes them feel more useful in general. We use this new electrical gadget to get back to the main chamber of the mill. Here we can use the charge to swing the hook above and smash it into the door that Joker and Harley are behind. Once we get inside, Harley seems to be mourning the Joker, who looks as if he's dying in a chair. He looks sickly and grotesque, and Batman confirms that he's dead. Harley chastises Batman for chasing Joker this long.
I said move!
This is all your fault! You've hounded him for years!
This is a trap, though, because Batman is ambushed by the real Joker. The one in the chair was a fake. He's hit with gas and knocked out by Harley. We then switch over to Catwoman again. Catwoman's moveset is actually a little different than Batman's. Her traversal is probably where the biggest change lies. She can't grapple straight to buildings like Batman can. She can use her whip to shoot up to ledges, but she has to climb the building that she's heading to. We can time button presses to climb faster up the building. I like this little difference because it shows just how powerful Batman really is. The fact that he can glide quickly over rooftops in the city clearly gives him an advantage over everyone else. Catwoman also uses her whip to fight and engage in Predator sections of the game. This doesn't really change the moves that we can do all that much. We can still upgrade Catwoman to a certain extent, but we definitely don't have access to the wide variety of gadgets that Batman does. She has some alternative gadgets that will slow and stun enemies, but it's not such a big difference that we need to really worry about it. When traversing around buildings, Catwoman can actually crawl on ceilings that have grates. This can be useful in stealth and for exploration. Catwoman heads back to her hideout to get her equipment. This gives us access to the Caltrops gadget. Our next goal is to break into Poison Ivy's lair. Once we get there, Poison Ivy lashes out at Catwoman for destroying her flowers. We have to fight Poison Ivy's goons here, mind-controlled people. We have to climb up to the top of this building, and Poison Ivy captures Catwoman, telling her that she won't help her again. Catwoman is an interesting character, one that actually began as one of Batman's villains. She turned into more of an anti-hero, though. She often works with Batman, helps him out when he needs it, but will turn against him if it suits her purposes. She doesn't really show allegiance to either side, just doing what's best for her. We then cut back to Batman waking up from being beaten by Harley Quinn. Joker is telling her to get back and coughing. Turns out Joker is actually sick. He's clearly dying. Something is wrong with his blood. He reveals that he injected his blood into Batman, so whatever sickness Joker has, Batman has too. This is a ploy to get Batman to find a cure. If he can cure himself, then he can cure Joker too. This is pretty symbolic. A piece of Joker is inside Batman. They are one in the same at the cellular level. These two are more similar than they think, and now they have a similar goal. On top of that, Joker has been shipping his blood to emergency rooms. Batman thinks this is the fated Protocol 10 that he's heard about, but Joker denies that. He kicks Batman out the window and he wakes up on a rooftop with a cell phone taped to his chest. Joker says that Mr. Freeze had worked on a cure for their disease, but he's no longer contacting him. Our next goal is to find Mr. Freeze. We have a climate analyzer that will show us the coldest spot in Arkham. Mr. Freeze isn't there when we arrive though, and we find out that the Penguin has kidnapped him in the museum. When we arrive, we realize that the Penguin has started scrambling the radio signals nearby, so we won't be able to get inside. We have to disable these machines so that we can hack the doors. When we find the Penguin, he tells us that because he's a collector, he wants to collect Batman. He releases his horde of goons on us and we have to fight our way through. He gives us a Titan to fight as well. These guys are a little different than the ones we saw in Arkham Asylum. Now we can stun them with our cape and attack them to use them as a weapon in the battlefield. They'll usually go down after 3 successful attacks. We can solve some puzzles to make our way through the museum. Once we get to the main room, we find out that Penguin has gotten a hold of Mr. Freeze's gun. He's frozen the water in between him and us. He's also trapped many of the Gotham PD officers in here. We have to make our way around the room and save these folks. We can use small barges to travel across the unfrozen parts of the water, utilizing our bat claw to pull us along. The ice is also very treacherous, and if we walk too quick, we get eaten by a shark, just like in Croc's lair from the previous game. After rescuing some of the soldiers, we find Freeze, who is not surviving well without his suit. Mr. Freeze generally has the same story in most of his adaptations. He had a wife who he loved greatly, but she was dying. He tried to research cryogenic technologies to save her, but his lab was destroyed in an explosion. This explosion caused him to only be able to survive in cold temperatures. This is why he needs his suit. He won't survive without it. He's generally a villain to Batman, but obviously here we need his help. This is a common thread in Batman's stories, seemingly more than other superheroes. Batman is often forced to team up with the very villains that he faces. This is usually a part of Batman's strategy to use these people when he can. It works to his advantage, and he usually turns on them in the end, taking them back to jail or Arkham. Once we get Freeze's suit, we find the Disruptor inside. This will deactivate his own gun. We can use this on Penguin as he tries to use Freeze's weapon against us. We deliver one punch to the Penguin and he's defeated. But that's not quite the story, because the Penguin blows up the platform Batman is standing on and he's sent into the lower floor, right into where Solomon Grundy is being kept. Grundy's real name was actually Cyrus Gold. Ages ago, he was a murderer and tried to hide in a swamp from his pursuers. Here, strange magical forces doomed him into immortality. Now he exists as an undead, unable to die, but unable to live. Grundy is a pretty easy boss fight in general, but one with decent mechanics. We can quickfire our explosive gel by holding the left trigger and hitting square. We can use this to detonate the 3 engines on the floor. We have to do this while avoiding the myriad of attacks that Grundy will throw at us with his balls and chains. This allows us to punch him, but the engines bring him back to life. I really like Grundy's design in this game. He very much resembles a demon from a hack-and-slash game. He looks like something we'd see in Devil May Cry or God of War, but seeing him here makes us realize that not everyone is like Batman. There are people that Batman fights that do have powers, that are gods or devils. We have to do another phase of this fight and Grundy goes down, but as Batman tries to finish him, he gets up and plunges his hand into an electrical box, reviving himself. We have to destroy the engines once more, now avoiding waves of electricity that Grundy shoots at us. He finally goes down, stuck inside the machine that he was using, and we destroy his heart. The Penguin decides to finish the job on Batman himself, but again, he's no powerhouse. We take him out with a few punches. Mr. Freeze then shows up, with his suit in his possession. He threatens the Penguin, but holds back from actually hurting him. He traps him in one of the museum exhibits. Freeze will be instrumental in helping us develop a cure. Freeze was able to develop a cure very easily already, but he needs a specific element to create it. The enzyme that they need will break down incredibly quickly. Synthesizing it will take decades. Batman knows somebody that has quite a bit of interaction with this enzyme, Ra's al Ghul. Just then, one of Ra's al Ghul's agents escapes from a nearby case and runs away. Luckily, she left a blood trail and we can track Ra's down. He's been around for quite a long time. He's effectively immortal with the use of his Lazarus Pit. He's hundreds of years old and is the head of something called the League of Assassins. His main goal is to take down humanity because he believes they are a scourge on the planet. He may have the key to the creation of this cure that could save not only countless lives, but Batman's as well. We trace the blood trail through Gotham and eventually arrive and have to chase down the assassin. Once we do, Batman plants a tracker on her so that we can find her base. Robin then arrives to defeat the assassins, but Batman tells him to stand down. This version of Robin is Tim Drake, inspired by Batman while watching the Flying Graysons. He then found out Batman's identity and tracked him down to train with him. Robin was worried about Batman, which is why he tracked him down this time. Batman gives him a sample of his blood and tells him to check the hospitals and find anyone with this blood in them. Robin is very worried about Hugo Strange knowing Batman's identity. Robin gives Batman the line launcher and heads off. This is the only gadget from the last game that we don't get access to at the beginning of Arkham City. We use the tracker to find out the location of Ra's al Ghul's headquarters. When heading through the sewers to get to the entrance, Batman starts to suffer from the disease that Joker injected him with. He's slowly dying over time. He doesn't have much space to get this cure, so he needs to move fast. We eventually find the entrance to Ra's al Ghul's base. There are some sort of robots here, long deactivated, but they have some sort of data on them. We have to seek out all of the robots and scan them to find the real entrance to the lair. Once we find the secret entrance and head through, Bruce begins to collapse. He sees his parents calling to him from the light. He refuses to let himself succumb to the disease. Oracle lets him know that he doesn't have much time left. The assassins ambush him, but someone stops them. Talia al Ghul, the heir to the League of Assassins. She is the daughter of Ra's al Ghul and has been known to get in the sheets with Bruce every once in a while. She tells Batman that only the successor to the League of Assassins can stand before him. She wants Batman to take over the League. This is usually what Ra's wants for Batman as well. Bruce says that he wishes to become a part of the League, that he's changed his mind since his new fate is ever approaching death. First, Batman has to prove himself, though. He drinks from a chalice, and we're transported to some sort of spiritual otherworld. This is where we learn to dive bomb. We have to fly from pillar to pillar without touching the environment. Completing the trials, we have proven ourselves, but have to find Ra's. Ra's al Ghul stands beside the Lazarus Pit, the thing that keeps him alive eternally. Ra's wants us to kill him to replace him as the head of the demon, but Batman doesn't kill. He was just using this situation to get a sample of Ra's al Ghul's blood for the cure. Ra's falls into the Lazarus Pit and comes back stronger. Then, it's time to fight him. His boss fight is pretty big, but very simple. We have to defeat some sand copies of Ra's, and he turns into a massive version of himself. We have to shoot electrical charges at him, aiming for the gaps in the wall he's created around himself. Once we do this, we can beat him down, and for a brief moment, we see reality, as Talia tries to convince Batman to take over the League of Assassins. Once we do this phase rotation twice, Ra's takes Talia hostage. He threatens to kill his own daughter unless Batman takes over. We get a new gadget here, the Rebound Batarang, which aids us in taking out Ra's. Batman takes some of his blood, and Talia is enraged at both Ra's and Batman. Ra's reveals that the Lazarus Pit has begun to not work on him anymore. It's starting to warp his mind and body. He's lived for far too long, and he can go on no longer. Batman tells him to end his crusade or he'll be coming back. On the way outside, we find out the mayor has been kidnapped. We may be able to get some information on Hugo Strange from him. When he's interrogated by Batman, he tells us that Hugo Strange approached him back at Arkham. He said he had connections, and all Sharp had to do was turn a blind eye to Strange's experiments. In turn, he would ensure that Sharp was elected. Batman casts Sharp aside, and Oracle again warns him that his health is deteriorating quickly. Batman wants to find out who Strange was working with, but we have to get the cure working first. We head back to the Gotham City Police Department to talk to Mr. Freeze. He uses Ra's blood to create a cure for the disease. He puts the cure in a safe, but before he gives Batman one of the doses, he destroys it. Mr. Freeze has begun to rebel. He wants his wife back. The Joker currently has her. He demands that we bring him his wife before he gives us the cure. We then have to fight Mr. Freeze. This is a stealth battle. We can't really fight Mr. Freeze head on because he has his gun. There are many ways that we can go about this fight. We basically have to find different ways to take down Freeze and damage him, but as soon as we use one method, he adapts and we can't use it again. There are many ways we can do this. Tons of different takedowns from vents, ledges, behind walls, or from behind. We can also stun him with magnets or take him down from above. Once we get enough hits on him, Freeze goes down for good. Batman unlocks the safe nearby and heads to grab the cure. Freeze still begs for Batman to find Nora, but the cure is gone from the safe. Harley Quinn already took it. Freeze can't synthesize anymore, so we're going to have to go steal it back. Freeze gives us a brand new gadget, which is incredibly useful. It's a freeze grenade that can stun enemies in combat, allowing us to attack or hold them off for a time. We can also use this to create platforms in water, which we can use to float across and get to other places. It can also be used to close off steam vents, so it's a really useful tool. On our way outside, Vicky Vale, a local news reporter, goes down in her helicopter, and we have to quickly save her from the criminals that are trying to take her out. Joker then calls us. He caused the accident as a distraction so that Harley could get the cure back to Joker. Now we're forced to head to him. We have to break back into the steel mill. This requires us to solve many puzzles and defeat tons of goons. In the next area, there's mines scattered about the room. We have to take out enemies while being wary of the mines on the ground. This is especially important in this stealth section because exploding mines definitely alert enemies that we're there. We eventually find Joker in the mill. He still looks terrible, even worse than the deteriorating Batman, but his makeup covers up his terrible face. He tries to fight us and we beat him up pretty quick, but he summons tons of enemies. We have to take down all of these guys at once. Joker turns the tables and is about to cut up Batman, but Talia shows up. She offers the Joker the head of the League of Assassins, and he accepts. She signals, though, that this is a ruse, that she has a tracker placed on her. We then jump back to Catwoman. Poison Ivy's last flower is stuck in Hugo Strange's vault, and she wants us to go find it. We have to pickpocket some keycards off guards, and once inside the vault, we find Catwoman's loot. We can take this and leave, but we're presented with two options. With Batman literally dying on the ground in the steel mill, Catwoman is tempted to go save him. That means she'd have to leave her spoils. She does decide to go save the Caped Crusader because she can't just leave him there. She rescues Batman, and Batman finally needs to stop Protocol 10. This is a move made by Hugo Strange to start killing inmates if they ever started to revolt. There are helicopters flying around the city, shooting tons of people and killing them in cold blood. We have to scan these helicopters to find the master control program. This allows us to hack Tiger encrypted consoles. We can then infiltrate Wonder Tower. This is Tiger's base of operations and where Hugo Strange is located. We begin scaling this tower. Strange confronts Batman over video. He tells him that he's the one to blame for everything that's happened. If he never existed, none of the villains at present would be there. This reflection is common in Batman stories, but he doesn't let it stop him. We eventually get to the top of the tower, grappling our way up above. We confront Strange, and Oracle shuts the Wonder Tower down. Batman shows Strange what's happened to the city, but he loves it, showing no signs of remorse. Hugo begins to talk about his powerful friends and how he can't be stopped, but he's killed, run through with a sword, by Ra's al Ghul. Ra's was behind this all along, controlling Strange with the offer that he could replace him at the end of this. Strange begs for more time to finish his work, but Ra's refuses. He says that Batman can't stop what's coming. This is just the beginning. Strange activates a program on his computer which blows up Wonder Tower, catapulting Batman and Ra's into the air. Ra's is then impaled on a fence, and Batman makes his way out. The Joker contacts Batman, having already captured Talia al Ghul. He invites Batman to the movie theater for a red carpet event. We follow Talia's tracker to the theater. Here we have to strategically remove the snipers pointing weapons at the entrance. We finally get inside, and Joker kicks Talia. He tells Batman that it's too late and asks our hero for the cure, but we don't have it. It's then that Talia stabs Joker with a sword. Batman scolds her for this, telling her that there's always a choice, that they don't have to kill. Talia took the cure back from Harley, but we see flashbacks to all of Joker's moves from this game. Turns out that wasn't Joker the whole time. Talia is shot by the real Joker, who's very much still diseased. He says that sometimes it was him and sometimes it was someone else. Joker again asks for the cure. We realize that the Joker that was stabbed wasn't a body double, but it was Clayface. Clayface clearly has the ability to impersonate others. He was shortly in the first game as an answer to a riddle. We have to defeat this boss, the final one of the game. We have to use our freeze blast on him, which slows the boss down. We can also avoid his roll attacks so that he slams into caches of explosives around the room. When his health is low enough, we get chances to slice him up with the sword still in his back. Joker blows up the floor, and we fight the last phase of this boss down below. He summons clay goons to fight us. They only take one hit to slice through with our new sword. We have to freeze Clayface when he shows himself and eventually damage him enough to stun him. When this is done, Batman jumps inside of his mouth and cuts him up from the inside. He then finally takes the cure. The disease is gone from Batman. He is saved. Clayface is knocked into the Lazarus pit and the building explodes. When Batman wakes up, he has just enough cure left for Joker. Joker begs for the cure. It's the only way he'll survive. But he says something important.
What are you waiting for? Come on! I killed your girlfriend, poisoned Gotham in hell. It's not even breakfast. But so what? We all know you'll save me.
We all know you'll save me. Batman considers whether or not to give the cure to the Joker. Joker stabs Batman in the arm and he drops it on the ground. Batman says that he would have saved the Joker, and he thinks it's funny. He dies, laughing one last time, gasping for air on the ground, a smile on his face. Batman carries his body out of the theater and refuses to comment on what happened inside. The game ends with our hero walking away from the scene. Now, there's a lot to unpack here. First of all, I have to respect the fact that the writers decided to actually kill off Joker. The Joker really has some super big plot armor. Obviously, he's a pretty important character, and the writers like to keep him around. He's iconic and a big draw for comics, games, movies, and even TV shows. It's not a great idea to kill him off if you want to keep your numbers high. Now, this isn't an insanely brave thing. The Joker has been killed before, but this was really only the second entry in the series, and the writers got rid of probably the most iconic villain in the series. I think it was a good move, though. It allows them to explore some complex ideas with his death, and it also was just bold to do in the first place. It allowed the team to branch out and focus on other villains, tackling larger challenges. There's also a lot more here than just killing Joker. This means a lot for Batman's character as well. Batman actually considers killing Joker for a moment. He has to weigh the options, whether saving him would just mean disgracing all of the lives that he's taken. If he saves Joker, the lives he will inevitably take again in the future will also be on Batman's hands. He'll be responsible for him yet again, when he escapes Arkham and kills hundreds, even thousands. But Batman still doesn't kill him. He still decides to rise above all that, because that's what Batman is. He's a symbol, an inspiration. He has a responsibility to be better, to show people that someone can be better in a corrupt city, a criminal world. But the Joker stabs Batman. He gets overzealous and spells his own downfall. In the end, the Joker doesn't seem to fear death. He isn't angry. He isn't scared. He dies still laughing. He's satisfied by the chaos of it all, by the unpredictable nature, by the ridiculous fact that Batman was still going to save him, even after everything. But that's technically not the end for our story. There's still one more mission to be played here, with Catwoman as a part of her DLC. She heads back to her hideout, but it's rigged with explosives. She realizes that Two-Face has taken her spoils, and she tracks him down to the museum. Here we have to fight a boss battle against Two-Face. This is all a stealth boss battle. We have to take out Two-Face's goons around him and sneak up on him using any takedown method we please. This will take a chunk of his health away, and once we do that enough, he's defeated. Catwoman runs into Batman outside the museum. He tells her that they still have work to be done. She tells Batman that she wants to get her stuff back. At this point in the game, we have free reign. We have unrestricted access to the open world and can now pursue all of the side content that the city has to offer. We can actually switch between Batman and Catwoman at switch-off points in the city. Catwoman has her own specific collectibles that Batman can't get. These are usually Riddler trophies that are pink-colored instead of green. There's a lot we can do as far as side content goes. We can of course do this throughout the game, but the best spot to clean up all this and finish everything is at the end of the game. The biggest concentration of content is probably the Riddler challenges, which reappear in this entry. They are mostly the same as Arkham Asylum. We have Riddler trophies and actual riddles which can be found or solved. The trophies usually require us to solve a short puzzle, which can range from some incredibly easy to mind-boggling. The riddles can be solved by scanning something in the environment. These are mostly pretty obvious, especially if we have the locations revealed on the map beforehand. This isn't as easy this time around as just finding a secrets map. Riddler has some informants running out and about throughout the city. These are glowing green on our HUD. We can defeat the enemies around these informants and leave them to be interrogated. This will reveal the location of some of the Riddler challenges in that area. This obviously makes it much easier to locate these trophies and riddles. There are some extra things we can do, like popping Joker balloons and crushing Joker chattering teeth. Some physical challenges appear as well, requiring us to glide for a certain amount or take down enemies in a particular way. In general, there's a ton of things required to actually complete all of Riddler's challenges and complete his mission. There are over 400 things in total that need to be completed before we find all of them. Speaking of the Riddler, he actually has much more of a presence in the side content than just a voice in this entry. We find out that Riddler is actually kidnapping people. His side missions involve tracking these people down and rescuing them. It's not that simple though, because we have to find a specific amount of collectibles before we can complete each of his missions. Once we do, Riddler will generally have some sort of wild contraption set up that we have to solve to save the prisoner. These are actually really cool and well done. Turning the Riddler into a sort of Jigsaw-like villain for this entry was an amazing idea and just works really well for his character. It works especially well since it's juxtaposed with the Riddler's upbeat tone and voice. The only downside I will point out about the Riddler challenges in Arkham City is there are just far too many. There's so many trophies, and if we're clearing through them at the end, it's still just a long grind to get every single one. After the 200th one, they start to get a little annoying. I will say that they usually aren't repetitive. The team seems to try and make each puzzle unique, but there's just so many of them that you get easily worn out. I can't say the same for the other side content in the game though, which are the side quests. These usually involve a specific villain from the Batman series and sees us taking them on or delving into their world in a different way. Fragile Alliance sees us finding Bane, who has said that Joker is gathering his Titan Serum. He sends us out to find different pods of Titan Serum located throughout the city. We have to destroy these with explosive gel. When we head back to him, he fights with us to defend against some foes. We realize, though, that Bane was just trying to collect the Titan Serum for himself, and he tries to attack us, but Batman quickly traps him in an elevator and destroys his supply. Cold Call Killer was probably one of my favorites. This begins when we hear a ringing phone in the city. We answer it only to hear Zsasz, who begins slowly telling us his life story. He will tell us this story in bits each time we answer one of these phones. We can also track him, though, as long as he's on the phone. Slowly, we begin to triangulate his location and eventually track him down to save the hostages that he's taken. This is such a great mission because we're slowly tracking down Zsasz across multiple missions, but at the same time, we're becoming more familiar with him. He's telling us his entire story, how he got to the place he is now. When the final confrontation comes, we know who we're fighting against. We know a lot about him, and that makes for a more compelling engagement. Heart of Ice sees us trying to track down Nora Freeze, Mr. Freeze's wife. This one is pretty short, just sees us finding the frozen Nora Freeze, but it is an extension of what he wanted us to do in the main story originally. The Tea Party will see us being captured by the Mad Hatter, a villain themed after the Alice in Wonderland story. He drugs us and we're in some sort of clock nightmare world where we look quite a lot like a rabbit and are forced to contend with Hatter's thugs. We eventually wake up and are free of the drugs that he gave us. Watcher in the Wings requires us to find Azrael all over the city. He's in 4 different locations where he gives us sigils to scan. These will line up over the map of Arkham City and reveal one final location. Once there, Azrael tells us that he's part of an order and was meant to watch Batman. He gives us a prophecy foretelling that Batman will save Gotham during its darkest hour, but will fall in the process, possibly hinting at future plot lines. There are multiple other missions that allow us to gain upgrades for certain gadgets, but they're mostly pretty short and inconsequential. We of course also have the return of challenge mode in the game, which allows us to take on a variety of different challenges and test our skills. I again have to commend the inclusion of the character trophies here. I think they're even better in Arkham City, and they even include a ton of different trophies from alternate versions of Batman, Robin, and Nightwing. They're great, and just getting to see the Sinestro Corps version of Batman in a game is fantastic. There is still one piece of content that we need to talk about before we get to my final thoughts on the game. That is the final piece of story-related DLC released, called Harley Quinn's Revenge. This DLC begins with us playing as Robin as he heads into the steel mill to look for Batman who's gone missing. Robin plays pretty much the same as our other characters. He uses a bow staff instead of his fists or a whip though. He has some extra gadgets just like Catwoman does. His particularly distinct gadget is his portable shield, which lets him pass by steam vents and deflect bullets. I will say I like this version of Robin quite a bit. He's a bit more serious, a little bit older than the classic version. He seems to take himself and his situation a bit more seriously as well. This fits the world of the games a lot better, and I think conforming each character to this world is a good idea. Heading through the steel mill, it seems like Harley Quinn has taken Batman. After fighting through tons of her lackeys, we eventually find Batman's utility belt. We switch over to Batman for the next mission, back before the beginning of this DLC. Batman was originally at the steel mill to save some captured Gotham City police officers. Harley had captured some of them inside, so we head in to look for them. We track down a couple officers and have to find a code for Harley's secret hideout. This comes from interrogating a few of her goons. Once we get inside and save one of the officers trapped there, Harley tries to shoot him, but Batman jumps in front of the shot. This knocks him out and the thugs take him away. We then jump back to Robin, who heads deeper into the facility. Harley is clearly in mourning here. She's been affected deeply by the loss of the Joker. She can't move on and wants revenge on the man she blames for his death, Batman. Hence the quite obvious name, Harley Quinn's Revenge. She's even constructed a statue of the Joker that Batman is trapped inside of. As Robin, we have a boss fight with Harley. This works in a very similar way to the Two-Face fight with Catwoman. We just have to take out the goons around Harley and use takedowns on her multiple times. Once she's gone, we can get the keycard and free Batman. We then switch back to our hero one final time and have to defeat a ton of enemies while Harley shoots at us from a statue. Once we trap her, she reveals that the statue is actually filled with bombs. When we escape, Batman can't find Robin. He thinks he was killed in the blast, but just as Harley is about to stab Batman, Robin jumps in and saves him. Batman's relieved, but leaves the scene with Gordon wondering if he's okay. This DLC was an alright epilogue. It also ties into the epilogue of the main story. There was an Easter egg in the main game that implied that Harley was pregnant with Joker's baby, but this DLC seems to confirm that it was a false positive. It's not a bad story in general, and it's pretty good to see how the death of Joker has affected the people around him. Batman seems to relate to Harley Quinn a little bit at the end, thinking that his adopted son, Robin, is dead for a brief moment. He's greatly troubled with the idea that he would have to go through that again. Batman Arkham City is a great game. It's a massive improvement on every area of Arkham Asylum. Asylum was impressive when playing it as an introduction to the series, but playing Arkham City, we realize how kind of unimpressive it is when compared to something that just fixes every single one of its problems. The combat is greatly upgraded here. City flows with a very specific rhythm. Finding that rhythm is the best way to get better at taking down our enemies. But getting better at the system is also about finding restraint. Our first inclination is to mash buttons in preparation for the next move, but this just doesn't work with the timing of the system. We'll get much better timing with attacks when we actually slow down and try to plan our moves ahead. We can't think like a player, we have to think like Batman. The system actually forces us to play the character and get into his shoes. This automatically makes us identify with him and feel closer to him. Arkham City's story is fantastic as well. It explores the deeper parts of Batman's character. It delves into the depths of what makes him do this and how he deals with the terrible things happening around him. Not only that, but it extrapolates on the relationships that Batman has with his villains. It creates a wonderful cast of characters that are all intertwined and connected. These people are all vying for the top seat and bringing about their downfall in the process. It also asks the complex questions, especially regarding Batman and Joker's dynamic. The story throwing us the curveball that Joker is gone at the end is quite a somber note to finish off the story. It's bittersweet. Joker was a murderer and delighted in killing people, but he was also part of the ecosystem that is Gotham. He made the city what it was, and it's not that the city won't be better without him, but it will certainly be different. The story also just feels like a classic Batman story. It does its own thing enough to feel separate, but it also follows the structure and keeps the iconic elements of Batman enough to make it feel like the characters are being done justice. The story feels like an adventure that we go on, solving mysteries. Characters come in and out, helping or harming. There's a really nice flow, and we're constantly surprised throughout. The side content of Arkham City is also great. The side missions represent the extra characters very well. This serves to further widen the world that we're in. It makes it feel real, lived in. It also feels like exactly what Batman would do. He wouldn't just focus on this one threat. He wouldn't be just taking down the Joker. He'd also be tracking down Deadshot and leads on Azrael and helping out Freeze. Batman has the entire city of Gotham on his shoulders. It's his responsibility to make sure that things go well, that people are safe, that they are protected. He can't just stop doing that because there's one large threat. Some of the collectibles can feel a bit bloated, but they are generally pretty fun, and the Riddler story specifically is really well fleshed out. It feels like an expansion on its own. The challenges are also really fun, especially if you want some unbridled combat, just beating down bad guys and taking them down from the shadows. It's also particularly great to use some of the extra costumes that the game gives you. The whole city is wonderfully crafted as well, and is probably the highlight of the entire game. The entire environment feels like a real place. There isn't this massive grid layout with copy and pasted buildings. It's messy, it's dirty, there's stuff to do everywhere. The environment design is perfect, buildings are laid out very well. The heights of everything seems specifically placed. We have great traversal mechanics that allow us to travel across as fast as we want, but there are also riddles that force us to go down to the street level and look at the signs, look for solutions to these conundrums. Batman Arkham City is just incredibly well done overall. It's a great open world game and would really come during the golden age of these kinds of games, but that golden age wouldn't last long. Arkham City was loved by critics. It still holds a 96% on Metacritic for the PlayStation 3 version of the game. Game Informer gave it a perfect 10, calling it the best licensed video game ever made. Arkham City was also beloved by fans. It was already hotly anticipated after Arkham Asylum's success. At the time, it sold incredibly quick, with 2 million units sold in the game's first week. In 3 months, the game had sold 6 million units, which was already 2 million more than Arkham Asylum had sold in its entire life. With this incredible success, Rocksteady was on a roll, but the next game in the series would not be developed by Rocksteady. But we'll talk about that next time. Bye, Dad.